Alrighty, guys, welcome back to another episode of Failing Forward. As always, I'm your host, Jared Wunderlich, and with me today is Partha Unnava.
Yeah,
I already said it right.
You
Did I
got
do it okay?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. Dude, super happy to have you here in the studio with us today. This has been an episode that I've probably dedicated more thought and time to leading up to it than any other episode.
I love that, man.
And I think part of it is that you and I don't know each other all that well yet.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of impact there because there's going to be a little bit more just genuine moments of conversation between us as we kind of go through this conversation. Would you?
Yeah,
maybe
I
agree
think
with
so.
that?
I think there's just a relative intimacy you can achieve with strangers that you get better than if you actually know somebody well. You know what I mean? There's no baggage there to prevent you from being truly yourself.
Well, and there's no previous perception as
Yeah.
well. You know, even when you're, now that you say that, even when you're exploring maybe a new topic or a new conversation with like an old friend or a business partner, you're almost hearing everything they say with your entire previous perception of what you have of that person.
Yeah.
Whereas that doesn't exist now.
Yeah, 100%.
Man, you're coming out the gates swinging. I love that.
I've got notes.
You got notes. But super happy to have you here there. Glad you're able to come all the way out from California to be with us. For those of you guys who aren't aware, you've done quite a bit so far in your young career, because I saw you just turned 28.
Just turned 28.
Congratulations,
Thank
by the way.
you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm an adult now.
You're an adult now.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the age you put out there. Like, all right, by 28, I got to get it together.
Yeah.
I'm 29. I moved it out a little bit. But you've done quite a bit. You started a company at a pretty young age, which I do want to get into a little bit in that story. But it's also led you to some very interesting places, brought you some very exciting opportunities, including being listed on Forbes 30 under 30, which is amazing. And I want to give you another huge congratulations for achieving that as well.
Thanks, dude.
That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
But just to help our audience kind of have that a little bit more intimate connection as well, would you mind telling a little bit about your story in your, I guess, coming up not only with the idea of Lasso Gear, because I'm very interested in how that came to be, but also kind of what you went through to just start that as a whole.
Totally. So before we even get to Lasso, we have to start in college. So
Please do.
my whole story starts in Georgia Tech, where, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, huge Ohio State fan. So it was a big leap for me to even leave the state to go to college. And when I got down there, started the engineering curriculum. It's one of the top ones. So it's a very rigorous school. So it was a place where I started to, for the first time, really be challenged intellectually in terms of how I, saw the world. And at the same time, there's a lot of pressure when you're amongst a lot of really brilliant people to have your career plans really solidified at a young age, right? And so there's this kind of subtext that you got to get the degree and then you got to be doing internships every summer to set up for a job. And so I came in ready for that, started doing an internship that first summer after college, and I broke my ankle that summer playing basketball recreationally, doing that. And it was like the first real moment for me where I had enough knowledge, even just at a basic level of a space, to say, hey, I think I can actually make this better in the world than it is right now. And for me, it was crutches. So what happened was I was dating a girl at the time, and I fell down the stairs during a party that summer when I was back in Ohio. No drinking. I didn't drink back then. I fell down the stairs on my crutches and it sucked. It hurt. And
you were on your crutches this time? Oh my gosh.
It was miserable. So I was like, man, there needs to be a better crutch. And so I took it back to school, and we have these classes. We had these classes at Georgia Tech where you would take a product and you would innovate it. And so I focused on the crutch, brought a team of people together, and made a better version essentially. And at first I was focusing on stair climbing, but over time I started to focus on a broader problem with a crutch, which was the underarm pain and the pinching in the nerves in the underarm. And so I created this essentially better version. And it was this point for me, is right by this time, it's like sophomore year, right? 2012 for me. And I had this like kind of two paths I could take. I could go down and actually try to bring this thing to market. So go down that path, or, the pressure of the peers, the pressure of the community around me, go do a job. So I decided, let me try an internship. If I don't like it, then there's no way I'm ever going to work for anybody else, and I've got to make this thing work.
Mhm.
And I did an internship, and like week one, I remember calling my dad and saying, yo, like, I can't do this. Like there's nothing for me to do all day. And I think that's one of my problems with, a lot of how people build businesses is that there's no real opportunity for people who have ideas to be able to voice those ideas and learn, right?
Absolutely.
So that was something I felt like I'm really big on growth. I'm really big on finding the path in my life that allows me to grow the most. And entrepreneurship turned into that for me, where I had no real ceiling above my head in terms of what I could be. So I applied to a bunch of these accelerator programs, applied for funding, eventually got into one in Memphis, which was newer, focused on medical devices. And so I dropped out of school, moved to Memphis, kind of random city, and just started working on this crutch. And we raised some money. I was with two of my friends, and that's really where everything started for me. And so, you can imagine like a 20-year-old kid drive around campus, just got a 50K check, like stoked, it was,
Mhm.
it was crazy. I remember Pull Down the Windows, Started from the Bottom by Drake had just come out. That's playing on loop. And it was a whole moment. And
Absolutely.
I went into Memphis, and really it was like that following year that I got really tested. So, put on follow on capital, but we actually moved back to Atlanta. My two other business partners at the time decided to finish their degrees. I did not. So they were part time the whole time. And, as maybe a more cynical person would have expected, right when they got their degrees, it was time for them to leave the company. And coincidentally, it was when we were running out of funding. So for me, this was
Interesting.
like this moment where it was like, did I fuck this up? Like, did I
Mhm.
go the wrong way and just make a huge mistake in terms of my career? I think part of the perspective in that moment that makes it challenging is that when you're young, in your eyes, it's like what your peers are doing is like everything. That's what you're being compared
Absolutely.
against. And so even missing a year, right? Even if I were to have gone back to school and I was a year behind, that would have felt like a huge failure to me.
Mhm.
But in broader context, what is a year when you're 20? It doesn't matter at all, you know?
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I'm glad we were able to take a couple extra steps back in order to kind of piece together the story a little bit. And there's a couple of things I want to reiterate or unpack, though. And one, first, I have a question. I hear that story and I hear a lot of confidence initially in what you had in terms of an idea, in what you had in terms of bringing innovation to an industry. And I'm curious, did you grow up with that level of confidence in most of the things you did? Or was that more from the product that you created, allowing you to essentially just bet on yourself and say, yes, there is something here. I'm going to continue to move forward with that. And the reason I ask that is because I think a lot of young entrepreneurs or people who are considering entrepreneurship, that confidence is something that's a little bit faltering or wavering. And I think we all experience kind of a fluctuation with confidence. Um, but there are certain things in our life, whether it be in a certain act or a certain area of interest, that confidence is just kind of more unwavering. So I'm curious if
Yeah.
that was something more that's your personality or more the product that you'd spent so much time developing.
I had a lot of confidence intellectually.
Okay.
I grew up with school not being very difficult for me. So I always knew I could achieve on that front. So when
Hmm.
it came to even university, I worked hard, but I was still able to, have really, really great grades. And so when it came to starting a business and really any work that I did, even in my internship, I remember doing the internship over the summer. I remember spending about 4 hours a day, literally just researching how to improve my vertical jump. And that summer, by the way, I taught
Hmm.
myself to dunk. So it was a moment where I saw what hard work can actually accomplish in your life.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, if I can apply that to my body, what if I applied it to something I'm actually like naturally talented at, which is my mind, and try and make something happen. So I had a lot of confidence there. But in myself, I did not, in terms of like, I'd say the person, right? Like it's easy to have confidence in your skills, especially when they're proven. It's hard to have confidence in yourself when it comes to pitching, when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to like really navigating difficult conversations. And so I think that one problem that I had, which happens to people who are, rewarded for their academic success growing up, is that they compensate for their insecurities by trying to strive academically. And
Sure.
ultimately, it leads to a point where you have to, at some point, to grow in your technical skills, right? You have to look in the mirror and say, I'm not that good at this. But if that's the only thing that gives you value in your mind, then that point is going to be much further down the line for you. And you're just going to really stunt your growth as a person. And so for me, it was when my co-founders left and I had to completely emotionally and mentally break, that I had a moment to look in the mirror and say, okay, what am I really bringing to the table that's unique? And how can I bring this whole company into reality out of my head and bring this product into the world for real?
Hmm.
So
Wow.
yeah,
I really, really like not one, how you were able to interpret that as well. Yeah, I can tell you actually attach a lot of meaning and purpose to your own story. And
thanks, man.
that's something I'm familiar with as well. Um, but we have a couple similarities. I myself dropped out of college twice as well. Had a lot of personal worth tied into what I believe the perception of others of me were, specifically my parents, family, friends who are also in school as well. And you're absolutely right. It does feel like even a semester, let alone a year, puts you behind the pack.
Right,
You are now playing catch up
right,
at that point, and that provides a significant amount of stress to a young adult. The reality of it is that doesn't exist. That is a psychosomatic fear that we're creating in our head, just through a perception that we're creating, not even something that's actually being
100%.
reflected onto us. And I just want to make a small note that if you are a younger listener, if you're someone either entering college, you're in college, I would be willing to bet that that's a conversation you've had with yourself, because it's a time where you're being forced to determine a pretty significant portion of your path,
Yeah.
and you may not know what that path necessarily looks like. I know that's where I was at that
I
age as
think it's a
well.
ludicrous notion in general to
It
tell an
is.
18-year-old to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their
Yes,
life.
100%. I
Yeah.
switched majors 4 times. I started
Yeah.
with engineering program as well, went to history because I thought I'd be a good high school teacher, ended in exercise science, and uh, you do feel forced. You feel
Yeah.
forced to choose the rest of your life at a
And
very young
forced to pick
age.
something with prestige attached to it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want to hold your head up and be proud of the major program that you mention at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, and you go back home and see those friends that you knew
Yep.
from, those earlier years of life. And I really, really wish there was a little bit more of conversation around breaking that stigma, helping young adults understand that that time is extremely, extremely valuable. One, because you're still identifying who you are. You're still identifying, maybe even your purpose, your identity, and it's okay to take a breath. It's okay to
Right.
take a break. And it's honestly okay just to try stuff and
Right.
and not like it initially.
Right.
Um, but I really appreciate that you shared that portion of the story, because I think those are things that do sometimes get overlooked when you're looking at the grand scheme. When you're looking at someone who is, in their late 20s, has a successful business, has met these people, built this network, you tend to focus on that end result, and you hear people ask questions like, well, what's your daily routine? And like,
Right.
what are you doing like on a daily basis to be this person?
Right.
Well, it starts with the same struggles that a lot of us already have.
Yeah.
It starts with that pressure from our parents, that perception we're creating of what our friends think of us. Um, and I think it's important to know that there's a very level playing field in that term,
Yeah.
in that sense, I should say.
Was it familial or peer pressure in your life? Which one made a bigger impact?
Uh, I would say, well, now we're gonna open up a can of worms. I'm gonna say family.
Yeah.
But it's my perception of what I thought my family
Totally.
wanted me to do.
Yeah.
100%. And it's funny you bring that up, because I actually was having a conversation with my wife, just probably a week ago about this,
Yeah.
that my parents never told me like it was expected of me to go and do these things. I created that perception based on how I translated the information coming in,
Right.
based on what I saw my older sisters do or don't do, based on the fact that both my parents went to college. knowing that my dad came from a family that, didn't have a lot of money and he was the only one of his many siblings that did go to college, I created that perception that this is what was meant for me and needed of me.
Yeah.
So when that doesn't work out, as you can guess, some bricks come tumbling down, right?
Right.
That sense of reality comes tumbling down as well,
Right.
which can lead to a lot more hurdles moving forward
Yeah.
as well. um, so your two partners have dropped out of the business at this point.
Right.
They've gone on to pursue things more in their field of study.
Right.
You've ran out of capital for the company as well.
Right.
What was the company doing at this point? What was the main goal? What were you still bringing the product to market? Had you introduced it?
We were trying to find engineers
Okay.
to help. Basically, it's hard to bring a product to market.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to know what you don't know.
Especially a new product that no one's seen before.
Absolutely. So had to learn all of the manufacturing methods, had to identify manufacturers. I didn't have a big Rolodex, so
Sure.
I had to go out and really network. So a lot of it was trying to meet people in the industry doing similar things, trying to learn from what other people were doing and really just absorb as much as I could. But that period of time, me and my co-founders have been living in an apartment together.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't just lose two co-founders, I lost two roommates. And so during that period of time, I brought in two roommates off of Craigslist, which, fortunately were actually really genuine human beings. I was lucky, but I remember just the fear of it's like the lack of security or safety in your own home when you don't know who's going to live with you and you're giving out your address on Craigslist. That's not a great feeling.
Sure.
And you're living with people you don't know. You're in a bedroom, but there's two other bedrooms. It's not a big apartment. And you're just trying to figure out how to do this thing at the same time accruing debt because I don't have any money and I have no savings because I dropped out of college. I would sit in my closet floor and call my dad and just cry every day.
What was your parents' response to you wanting to drop out of college to do this?
My parents are actually college professors.
Really?
So the whole thing was positioned as a break.
Okay. So
I
they thought you were going to go back.
Yeah, I've got a lot of finesse in my game. So I know
Are
how
you
to
a little bit of a
position
salesman?
things. I know how to position things. Let's just say that. So I was able to, say hey, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to pursue this. They're like, that's great. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Super good for you. And my parents are awesome. They were cheerleaders the whole way. I'm fortunate that they were so supportive of me.
Absolutely.
And, we were talking about the friend versus peer versus family pressure. And, for me, it was also self-induced in terms of the expectations I had for myself.
Okay.
From early childhood, I was always, lauded for my academic achievements. And I remember teachers from middle school, high school, elementary school saying, this is one of the brightest kids we've ever taught. Partha picks things up like nobody else I've ever seen. I think you'll win it. Saying in front of a whole class, Partha, you're out of everyone in this room, you're going to win a Nobel Prize. And, that's a lot of expectation when you're growing up hearing that over and over, right?
Yeah. Because what does that do to the identity of the person when something doesn't go according to plan, especially according to, in terms of education or intellect?
Right. So I think it taught me to judge success based on achievements as opposed to what was happening internal.
Mm-hmm.
And, all of that builds to a breaking point. I'm a huge believer that everybody needs some sort of breaking point or rock bottom to really find happiness. Because I think that from when we're born, we're almost institutionally programmed into being a version of ourselves that everybody around us wants us to be. It's based on family, friends, society, and, the educational system. But my feeling is that when we break at some point in our lives, we get the opportunity to actually test which of those walls around us that we thought were there are actually real or not real. And so for me, it was do I really have to be a doctor to impact healthcare? Right? That's
Mm-hmm.
one huge assumption that I had as a kid. No, I don't have to be. Do I really need a college degree to impact the medical field? No. Do I need, a million things that I thought I had to do that everyone around you tells you are not actual rules in society? And so you start to figure out that you can break a lot of the rules and just be yourself. And that's the best path forward. But I think it's a painful process to get to that place.
It 100% is. That was beautifully described.
Thanks, man.
You obviously have spent a lot of time not only expanding your knowledge of, I would imagine, things like psychology or things around that area, but you also have a lot of just internal conversations with yourself.
Yeah.
I can tell. Um, I just loved that four wall imagery that you described there for us, because that was my story as well. As I mentioned, dropped out of school twice, had this perception that this is what I absolutely had to do. And I've always just described it as this was when my personal reality came crashing down. This was what I thought had to happen, didn't happen, and now those walls disintegrated
Yeah.
essentially. But to actually be able to put it into a very well descripted image, I think helps people understand and even determine and dissect what those walls are for them. Even now, if this isn't something that has happened to them before in terms of hitting that rock bottom or things breaking,
Yeah.
as you put it. Um, but I really, really like the way you described that, because there's a huge ability to understand when you're able to attach an idea to something physical.
Yeah.
That's why I've actually always liked physics, when I
Oh,
was
me
in
too.
engineering, because you can
Yeah.
see the equation, you can
Yeah.
see it in the real world.
Yeah.
Whereas like things like chemistry, it's like, this is the way it is. You just have to
That
believe
was that was my
it.
pet peeve with biochem.
Yep.
They would say, "Hey, okay, here's the test." And you'd be like, "Okay, but how does this work?" "Oh, we don't know."
Yeah. It's just,
Oh,
this is the
okay.
answer. You have to know
It's like
this.
I hate being at the edge of science.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
sucks.
No, I was the same way.
Yeah.
Physics was great. The professor would write the answer on the board, or the equation on the board, and then it was, all right, we're going straight into lab, and we're going to actually see this motion, this
Yeah.
transition physically happen. And there's just something about that makes uh, understanding a new topic or a new concept so much more easy.
Yeah.
Um, wow. So you had your parents' support, which was unbelievably beneficial. I know a lot of young adults probably didn't have that benefit in terms of wanting to branch out and do something maybe a little bit different from the original plan. Um, and I'm curious, was there something specific? Actually, I want to back up for a moment, because I found a quote of yours that I wanted to ask you about. Um, you mentioned at one point that you were wanting to make an impact, and you said this a little bit ago as well. But in the quote I found, you said you wanted to create change through capitalism.
Hmm.
And I was intrigued by that, because I've never heard someone mention capitalism when talking about a purpose, a passion, a dream, a goal. Um, and I'm just curious if there's actually something specific behind why you chose to include that in that statement.
I'm a big believer in free choice,
Hmm.
and so I'm also a huge believer in social impact. Um, I don't believe in government as a great means of creating change. I think it's really inefficient. And so since I was young, I never had any desire to be a part of that. But I saw businesses that were doing good all the time and inspiring people and all of that. And so when I started with the crutches, the intent was not only to innovate, but to do it with some flair so that people could actually say, "Oh, wow, I want to be like that company," right? Because I grew up with so many role models that I was inspired by. And for me, it was J. Cole, it was Dwayne Wade, it was LeBron James. Like that's who inspired me. And as an adult, I'm sitting here like, can I make business look like that for the next generation? Can I give it some swag? Can I give it some good energy so that they can see what we're doing with Lasso and see like the whole point of Lasso is to take healthcare, repackage it in a culturally forward way, deliver products that perform from an innovation standpoint like we've never had before, that provide health benefit but feel emotionally dope, like really, really cool.
Hmm.
And that's what I mean when I say create change through capitalism is when you have something people want, when you make something people want, when you brand it right, then people will change their decision making to be a part of that, right? And so if you really want to impact society, if you want people to eat healthier, right? If you want to do this or that, you have to make it culturally relevant and cool. And it's like you hear so much in the any sort of social impact or any sort of even philanthropy, right? I don't believe giving away money is the best way to create impact. I believe that creating products that necessitate cultural change in people that leads to greater humanity like centric values in society is how you do it. And when you have profit incentive attached, then you get funding to do this stuff faster. You know, philanthropy is almost, I feel like it's like begging, asking for money for a nonprofit. It's challenging
Mhm.
because there's the impact side of it. And of course, the tax benefits. But when you're able to make people back money by doing good, that's an exciting thing.
Wow. That was an amazing answer, and I'm actually very, very glad that I decided to ask that question, man. Um, no, that was something I came across, and I read it and kept moving, and I was like, "Well, hold on, like, I've never heard someone, like," it seemed intentional. There was a very positive intent in using that term specifically. Um, but you just answered that perfectly, and I think that was probably a viewpoint that needs to be heard right now, especially not to go too far down a political conversation, 'cause that's not what this show is. But you do have a narrative right now, especially in our country, that seems to oppose capitalism or believe that there's answers that may better provide for the society, or something to that degree. And personally, I'm not one of those people. I'm a supporter of capitalism as well, mainly because I believe it provides me and my family the best opportunity to find our own ceiling.
Yeah.
I think there are some other systems that make a ceiling for you.
Yeah.
If I end up on the street because businesses I started didn't work out, well, that's on me. I'll find a way to learn from those mistakes or those choices I made and try again. But if I'm on the street because the system failed me, I don't like that. At that point, I'm feeling like I'm being forced into
Right.
a box. At that point, I'm
Right.
I'm I'm given a very limited opportunity to define and create my life.
Right.
And to me, that's what capitalism is. It's an opportunity to make my life everything it possibly can be.
Right.
And I think you share a similar interest. You express it much more eloquently than I do, and
No, I mean,
that's
I'm on
very
the same
beautifully
page
said.
as you though. That's the beauty of being able to build your own thing, follow your
Hmm.
own path, find your passion and do something with it outside of the constraints of just the typical rules you could get out of
Right.
school because there's no ceiling to it.
Hmm.
Like you really can build whatever you'd like.
You can, and you
Yeah.
said it earlier as well. You can break the rules. You can branch out on your own, do things differently than how they've been done in the past,
Yeah.
and through that, that's how you get innovation.
Yeah.
Innovation does not exist in another system, because there's no competition.
Yeah.
There's no strive to do anything better.
And I think people miss too, like I think the culture around innovation, you have to have some punk rock energy to you. You know what I
How so?
mean? You have to kind of be ready to say like I'm okay with people not liking how I move or
Mm,
how I act. I'm
okay.
okay with a little bit of, frustration around what I'm doing
Yeah.
because you know that like you messing with things is going to rile people up. And like
Hmm.
that's a good thing when you rile
It
people
is.
up because it means you're shaking up the system and bringing something new to it. The beauty of capitalism is if you're not creating more value than the current system, it's not going to work anyway.
Hmm.
But if you're riling people up, that's a pretty good indicator that you're making some impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're making waves. No, I also believe capitalism is actually the system that's the most closely linked to the biology of life and the earth itself.
Yeah.
It's trial and error.
Yeah.
It is create, fail, learn, try again. I mean,
Yeah.
that is why humans exist on this planet in the form that we do now,
Yeah.
is because previous versions did not last.
Yeah.
And I think that just ties in very neatly with my personal beliefs in evolution, the purpose and benefits of things like stress
Yeah.
and anxiety and even depression. We unfortunately are moving towards a society that can avoid any and all forms of stress with a touch of a button. And if we can't avoid it, we can take a medication or a supplement to reduce it or hide it or mask
Yeah.
it. And I really, really am uncomfortable with that,
Yeah.
because I believe in stress. I believe in its benefits. Stress is a signal.
I was
Emotions are signals.
hearing this concept of from it was actually in the last dance they covered this. Um in Native American tribes, they had, I forget what it was, a term for people who are different than
Mhm.
everybody else, who we in modern society would call crazy. And those people were celebrated because their, wild character traits would create value in some way. for the tribe. And Phil Jackson in that documentary mentioned that Dennis Rodman was one of those people who had these really wild characteristics, but it was all like him allowing him to be himself and not setting rules on him
Hmm.
made everybody on the team better, right?
Sure.
And I think in society we forget that not everybody has to be like us, but it's the fact that people are different that make us more robust as a society. If you think about anything from genetic pools all the way to any sort of, financial or mathematical models, it's diversity in your input data that gets you more robust models. It's diversity in how you're, reproducing that gets you a more robust human population that's less susceptible to disease. So we have to remember that it's diversity of thought that leads to the best ideas, innovations, and cultural progression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a practice very, very prevalent in the scientific community that you don't surround yourself with people who think like you do. You actually always seek out the people you know think differently, especially
Yeah.
when bringing a new experiment or a new concept or new hypothesis um, into the space, because they know that it will bring up a conversation, a question, or a thought that they previously did not have. If you constantly spend time with people who think and act just like you do, nothing new is learned, nothing
Yeah.
new is done. There's no adaptation, there's no conversation, there's no disagreement. It's just alignment
Right.
at that point. And I think that's a practice that unfortunately isn't meeting most people these days.
Yeah.
We're kind of addicted to comfort.
Yeah.
We will avoid people that think too differently from us for the sake of being in a comfortable, safe space.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to take us to a good place. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think you could even argue that a form of de-evolution could occur.
Yeah.
Stress is what made everything on this earth to this point.
Yeah. I'll say the one thing that I'll take solace in is that when you are around people you see the world the same as, that only lasts for so long, then you start to, get frustrated about that.
Sure.
So I think I've been thinking about it a lot with social media in terms of how it bundles similar opinions together or worldviews. That's good for a bit, but I think there's some level of um, emptiness that comes from everybody agreeing with you
Hmm.
from a human psyche standpoint. So I tend to be very optimistic about society in general, despite what we're seeing with the technological implications of how we communicate, receive information and approach different ideas. I think it's sort of these ebb and flow moments where sometimes we have a lot of progression, sometimes it feels like we fall back, but it's all
Hmm.
part of this forward cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you there. That was a nice little sidestep. I'm glad we took a moment to go down that road for a moment. Hey guys, we're taking a short break from our episode to remind you that season 1 of the Failing Forward podcast is brought to you by Atlas Nutrition. And today, guys, I have a brief special guest in the studio with me today. It's Atlas Nutrition coach, founder, and owner, Tony Polidoro. Tony, welcome back in, man. How are you?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely, brother. Super happy to have you here. Guys, to be completely honest with you, in light of what this show stands for, transparency, vulnerability, learning from each other, I wanted to invite Tony back in and have you guys hear our conversation about where this partnership came from and why it makes sense. Tony, would you mind sharing in your words what drew you to following through with this partnership?
Oh, of course, man. Yeah. So when you approached me with the idea of this failing forward mentality, I just truly believe that it aligns very well with Atlas Nutrition's approach of helping people achieve a healthy mind, body, and soul.
Absolutely. And that's something that really, really sets you guys apart. It's more than just nutrition plans, more than just exercise plans. They want to help you as a client grow from a mind, body, and soul perspective, from really every aspect of life. And I can say confidently, I'm assuming that's from a lot of your own experiences growing up and how you found fitness and what it meant to you. That's one of the reasons you and I have such a strong relationship, is we kind of both found fitness in terms of what it did and benefit towards our mental health.
Yeah.
And you guys do an amazing job with it. I can speak from personal experiences, as well as what I've witnessed. I mean, you guys have done some amazing things. You've created great partnerships with your clients. Heck, I've seen clients make it all the way to the national stage in terms of contest prep, and I've seen first time people in the gym fall so in love with this that they change their career paths entirely and become a coach of yours.
Yeah.
And it's truly been amazing. That's a testament to what you guys do, the level of care and personal connection you apply to your time with your clients. And I really just respect what you guys do. And to
Thank
be
you,
honest,
man.
I couldn't think of a better person to partner with for this first season. It's been amazing.
We're excited.
Absolutely. And you mentioned when you came in that you guys actually have been thinking up something additionally for our audience. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, of course. So obviously with the idea that your audience is very invested in wanting to change their lives, we want to support that and offer an exclusive discount to the Failing Forward audience.
That's awesome, man. So what you're saying is our audience is going to get exclusive discounts to some of your programs that you offer?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is huge because this is not something you guys do. You see and believe in the value of your programs and your services. So sales really aren't much of a thing in your business typically.
No, we rarely discount because again, we believe in the value, right?
Absolutely. This
But
is huge.
Want to make a difference.
And where could our audience find more information on this if they were interested in learning more?
Of course, yeah. So, reach out to us at our website, atlasnutritionllc.com, or Instagram at Atlas Nutrition Official, and mention that you're coming our way from Jared at Failing Forward.
This is awesome, man. I can't thank you enough for offering something like this to the audience. You're absolutely right. The people who do listen to shows like this are people who are always looking to improve. And guys, if you're looking to improve your physical fitness, you can't pick a better partner than the coaches at Atlas Nutrition. So give them a follow again at Atlas Nutrition Official on Instagram. Check out their website at atlasnutritionllc.com. Give them a shout. Let them know you're interested. Tell them I sent you. And sounds like they're going to take care of you really well. Tony, thanks again for coming on, letting us know that. And guys, I'll see you at Atlas Nutrition. So let's come back to Lasso for a sec. So I'm curious, what transition occurred that took you from attempting to fund this innovative crutch to coming up with Lasso specifically? Because I'm seeing the connections, but I also know there was probably something relatively significant that caused that as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple more pieces to the story.
Okay.
So we'll pick up where I left off. I'm broke. I'm in my closet. I'm freaking out. 2 months later, I get a call to come to Washington, D.C. And I get introduced to President Obama, and we get a picture taken together of him holding my prototype crutch. The only prototype I had, which, by the way, literally fell apart in my hands right after he walked away. Literally all of the pieces fell off. I don't know what divine intervention happened, but it was one of the most impactful moments in my life. After that, got on CNN, I got on Inc., I got on Forbes. Wow. I was everywhere. And for me, it was like, when you're insecure and you get attention, it makes you worse as a person.
Sure.
You have to be extremely secure to be able to handle inbound attention and to be able to differentiate between negative and positive inbound attention. And so I more or less botched that opportunity to like take a huge, meteoric rise with my career. I was too young. I was 21. I was way too young to handle it. So, just continued with the crutches. I had all these credentials, so it made it easier to raise money. So I raised more money. I got back into things. I hired some people. We brought the crutch to market. And, what was interesting was we crushed it online, and hospitals was like pulling teeth, despite the fact that we had a reimbursement code, despite the fact that, the math actually made sense for them to make more money off of our product than existing crutches.
Really?
It was a sector that people were not excited about, but the users were tremendously excited and passionate about our company and our product. And I saw this and just realized that the product that I had picked to innovate, if I wanted to change healthcare, was not the right product.
How so?
It was too unique of a prescription case. It just wasn't consumer enough. So essentially what we were selling online, the window of I had to find in somebody's life was like the 1 hour after they had an injury. Right?
Because you're only making that purchase once.
Right. And then a lot of people would return it on Amazon. So we got dinged a lot for that.
Really?
And right after they were done using it, So I get it, obviously, but like I saw the way that industry was set up, and I was like, this was a bad play. And so I took a step back and realized that if I could build a smarter way to reach consumers, still playing in the same sector of healthcare, which is called durable medical equipment. So it's anything from walkers, crutches, etc., all the way to braces and compression apparel. So I looked at it and I said, well, my injury was a foot and ankle injury, right? And when I came back from my injury, a year later was when I dunked that basketball. And over that summer, I added 10 inches to my vertical. I had 25 pounds of muscle mass that I added onto me.
Wow.
I mean, I was a skinny kid before. I was 130 at 6 feet.
I mean, at any body type, 25 pounds of
It was
muscle
yeah.
mass is a significant amount.
Yeah. So I got, like more to a normal size
Sure.
for myself. And through the process, found the power of joint stability exercises like ligament strengthening and injury prevention work in terms of how much that does for your body from a movement standpoint. Because you're in the exercise space, when you're doing like balancing on a Bosu ball and throwing a medicine ball back and forth with somebody, that stuff is the fundamental of how you actually improve the athleticism and the movement ability of your body. So my thought was, what if I can do what like joint taping would do, but put it in compression apparel or some sort of, base layer garment, so that there's no compliance barrier, there's no educational barrier. The majority of studies actually show that if you're using like a K tape, for example, it's going to wear off in 30 minutes. So your benefits that you spent 10 minutes figuring out how to actually get are gone by the time you even get to the gym or get to halftime in whatever game you're playing. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah. And it's because it uses your skin and adhesion to actually deliver the benefits. And my view was compression up until that point had been a feature in apparel. So essentially it was something people threw in to say, hey, we can now also, use this marketing claim.
Okay.
But the apparel industry doesn't think about their tools in the way a biomedical engineer does. And so I saw compression differently. I saw it as a way to deliver specific point support in different areas of a garment. And so essentially created what K-tape does in a sock and then patented that to do on every joint in the body. So that was the real premise of Lasso, was let's take bracing and daily, like there was no daily solution for me to move better, nothing, right? And so let me create something that doesn't change customer behavior and also can be culturally dope because it's apparel, and bring it to the market. And so we launched Lasso, and 2 weeks after we launched, dude, it was on NFL fields being worn in game. So the product benefits are real.
Yeah.
We knew it immediately. Brandon, actually, who was on the last episode, Brandon was our first user in the NFL of our crutch.
Was he really?
Of our crutch.
Of the crutch, because of the ACL.
And then first user of the sock, and actually first athlete for Lasso.
That's awesome.
We go back. But it was interesting to see how quickly that was picked up. And so our whole view with Lasso, and keep in mind, it's essentially like a second venture to me in terms of where my experience had me. So I was able to move a lot faster with this one. So we were fortunate to have Champ Bailey come on as an investor very quickly, and his gravitas and his personality and in his reputation really, got us off the ground, put us at a good spot to really go from idea to like early stage startup, spent a couple years figuring things out. And now we're at this really nice point where we've been doing really well from a growth standpoint, and we're ready to launch a whole bunch of new products and do some cool things with how we actually design the socks. And so the full vision that I had about these base layer garments, and for me, it's about being fashion agnostic, because I really see these healthcare products as a platform product. So if I can enable, if Louis Vuitton wants to collab with Lasso, if I can enable them to make it look however it needs to visually look for them to feel good, but the benefits and the medical backing is there for me to feel good that we're delivering that actual medical benefit, then we've all of a sudden completely changed what healthcare is. Because if you can make healthcare feel like, Kith makes their t-shirts feel with all their different brand collaborations, right. I mean, you're completely changing what people do on a daily basis, right? And for me, it's about helping people have products that enable them to live a healthy and active life. And so I really see Lasso as basically my way to say to healthcare as an industry, hey, look, this is how you do it in this generation. This is what it looks like to build a health brand.
Yeah, no, and you guys are doing that on all cylinders, from my initial perspective, as well as what you just shared with us as well. And preventative medicine, that space is growing very, very quickly. People are starting to pay attention to the things they absorb nutritionally, informationally, as well as just their daily practices and efforts as well. And I think you've hit this space at such an ideal time because there's an opportunity and there's a void to make preventative medicine sexy, to
Yeah.
make it dope, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Because it's really not right now. It certainly can be, and I think it's moving in that space. Like people I think are wanting to attach their nutrition to like their story. Like people are a
Yeah.
little bit more open to showing that on social media,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm doing my morning greens, things like that.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of room for preventative medicine to continue to grow
Yeah.
in terms of just what's appealing,
Yeah.
honestly. And I think you guys are just hitting it in full stride right now.
Thank you, man.
And
Yeah. And
you guys are,
I feel that way too, man. I mean, I get really excited about Lasso.
I can tell.
So we ask for like content from our customers, right? And we have a
Mhm.
very diverse customer base. We get photo shoots from the kids who wear our product, and they put on their Nikes, they put on their Beats by Dre,
Mhm.
and take all these photos and send them to us. And show me the last medical company, show me the last FDA registered medical device that people treated like that, right? Like that doesn't happen. And
No.
so for me, that's impact. That's the inkling that we're onto something massive.
Right.
And so it's about really bringing that forward and telling that story in a meaningful and a consumable way.
That's amazing, man. That is really, really amazing. So you said you guys are working on bringing out some new products as
We
well.
got a
But I
bunch of
assume
new
this is
ones.
going to be kind of, and you don't have to share too much,
Yeah.
obviously, but like I'm assuming compression on other areas of the body to
Exactly.
provide that support elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm super excited for the generation of kids that are going to have things like that at their disposal.
Yeah.
We certainly didn't have that stuff. We were getting taped up every day, or even if you did have that as
Yeah.
as a resource for you.
And you know what's crazy, dude? This was my like, so I don't get necessarily starry-eyed with
Mhm.
many people that I meet, but it's like I have like rappers and NFL players and NBA players hitting me up for more socks,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, whoa, that's dope. Like that's really cool. That's how you get the spillover and cultural impact. So for
Right.
me, it's like that. I that's what I'm looking for. But I
Mhm.
mean, anyway, we can go back to
When it reaffirms
some-
that you're
yeah.
doing something that is making an impact,
Yeah.
and there's no shame in acknowledging that. I think people even will hesitate to share a thought like that because for some reason, and Alex, our producer, and I were talking about this earlier this morning, we unfortunately live in a culture where people believe that everything is finite, that there's only a certain amount of money in the world, there's only a certain amount of jobs in the world, there's only a certain amount of success in the world. And I think this is why people have a negative perception of billionaires. That's another
Yeah.
hot topic right now. And it ties, this is my belief personally. I don't know if this is actually accurate, but my belief is that that's an instinctual response from a very prehistoric version of human. When you're looking at a resource like, say, food, yes, that was a finite resource. If another person or tribe of people kill a buffalo, that's one less buffalo that you and your people now have the ability to kill as well.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we look at it with all resources. We see someone else get a job, even if it's in a field unrelated to what our experience is. And we now immediately think that's one less job for me to have.
Yeah.
If I see a billionaire, that's dollars that I can't have.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, people are a little bit hesitant to talk about the things that excite them, to talk about their
Yeah.
new job, to talk about the raise they got, to talk about how well their new business is doing.
Yeah.
Because they understand, even if they're not consciously aware, they understand that the people that are hearing the message are responding in that way.
Yeah.
And it's such a horrible way to think because that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Well, to your
If anything,
point,
it supports more growth. It supports more dollars to be made, more businesses to be built.
absolutely. And to your point, the animal brain, right? And our physical bodies. If you were to take a baby from today,
Mhm.
swap it with a baby from 10,000 years ago, both would grow up identical to their societies.
100%.
So our hardware that we have, our hardware is 10,000 years old, but our software is brand new.
Yep.
We can do whatever we want,
Mhm.
but you got to understand that your hardware is limiting and you got to know how to work around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have to talk more outside of
Yeah.
the podcast for sure. Because there's not enough time to talk about all the things I want to talk about
Yeah.
with you. Because that's scratching the surface of what I
Yeah.
know we could get into, man. I do want to make sure we save a little bit of time, though, to kind of shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And you and I briefly touched on this the other night on the phone. And that's just the topic of spirituality. So this is something I've gotten really, really interested in just in probably the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, I think right now anyway, I credit my mother
Mm-hmm.
for allowing me and even supporting me to be a thinker, to ask
That's
questions.
cool.
And she did it in a very unconventional way.
What
So-
did she do?
So to provide a little bit of background for you and the listeners, was raised in a Catholic household. My
Mhm.
mom was raised in a Catholic household. She went to Catholic school all the way up through high school. We went to church every Sunday morning. I was in youth group every Sunday evening, went on youth group trips in the summer where we went and, repaired houses in low income areas, all those things. And my mom had this habit or tradition, whatever you'd like to call it. When we leave church Sunday morning, me and my sisters would be in the back seat. She'd turn around and face us and ask us, like, what was our favorite part of the sermon or the service, or what part stood out to you? Because she wanted to know we were paying attention, and that we were getting something out of it. And I'm the youngest of three siblings, or excuse me, of three in total siblings. So, my sisters would pull out an answer. And from a very young age, I was making comparisons of things I was learning in church, to things I was learning in school. And I saw, some things that didn't quite match up.
Yeah.
So that time was my opportunity to ask my mom a question. Be like, hey, he was talking about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Life, and that doesn't really match up with like the story of evolution. Like, why don't these two things match up? And bless my mom's heart. She was raised in Catholicism, still is a very devout Catholic. She could have very easily said, this is the way it is, like, pay attention to what you learn in church. And, that probably could have been the end of it. I was at a young enough age that probably would have just made me more of a listener than a thinker. But because she turned around and actually allowed me to express my complete thought process and express why I was confused or why I, even had this question in the first place, and allowed this conversation to continue, that is, I currently, like I said, contribute to why I spend so much time in my own head and why I ask so many questions.
By the way, do you remember the answer she had?
To that question specifically? I don't.
Yeah.
She was very good at giving her opinion, but also supporting my question.
Yeah.
And she was very, very good about saying, but that's a really good question. You should spend more time thinking about that.
That's so cool.
And I love that she did that. And we even have conversations about religion and stuff now. Cause she asked that I stay in church until, I was 18 and received confirmation, which I did. And since then I've kind of separated myself from religion for different reasons, just because I don't want to get into that. That's for a lot of reasons. It just doesn't quite match up with my current beliefs. But it's still something I like to think about a lot. It's also what has led me to think about, as you were kind of talking about, like what makes us who we are in today's world based on who we were a million years ago.
Right.
And what about these almost ancient forms of spirituality? I've actually read the Bible front to back before, just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
I've looked into Hinduism.
By the way, how
curiosity.
many people have actually read the Bible?
I can't imagine it's many.
I'm not Christian, so I haven't, by the way. But how many people who are, practice a religion have read the book?
I would imagine it's probably a small number. If I had to guess. What's funny is when I read it, I was like in disbelief of the religion. I was like, well, maybe if I read it, it'll like help me like understand why I should believe it. But then I read it, I was like, oh, I don't. But I don't want to get too far down the religion path, because I guess I just want to use that as an opener to help you understand how I came to start looking into these other topics, such as spirituality and some of these practices that we more commonly see today, things like meditation. I don't know if you've read it yet, but Jay Shetty's new book, Think Like a Monk.
I have not read that
God,
yet.
you gotta get it.
Yeah,
I read
a
it in
big
like
Jay
2
Shetty
days.
fan.
2 days.
Okay.
Really, really good book. But if you don't mind, would you mind sharing a little bit about kind of where you are in that topic, how you came to it, and just how it affects your day-to-day life? I think that's the most impactful thing that I'd like to know personally, because there are some things that I've learned or been exposed to over the years that do affect how I think and what I believe now, as far as who I am today.
Yeah, my worldview, I would consider myself more of a philosopher. So I see the difference between philosophy and religion is basically philosophers are the smaller percentage of people who take the time to think through, what actually leads to a happy life for them.
Mhm.
And then when you take those learnings and you create systems that people can follow, that's how I see a religion. So I see religion as essentially the only scalable way to scale up a way of life, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I agree with you pretty strongly there. To me, religion seems like a way for society to answer the unanswerable questions in the past.
Yeah.
I think it just provided content, it provided comfort
Yeah.
to know, oh, well, this is why we're here. This is how we came to be. Um, and it all seemed a little bit maybe archaic isn't the right word, but just ancient.
Yeah.
Like not much has
Well,
changed in
it
terms of
is.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. But it just seems like not much has really changed or been modernized,
Yeah.
which I find interesting
Yeah.
because a lot of other things that have lasted through the years, they change with the society. But religion doesn't seem to do that, which has been kind of an interesting thing that I've mulled over quite a few times in the past. I almost wonder why.
Yeah.
Is it because a lot of the original stories are from a more ancient time and we prefer to almost preserve it? Um, or is it more because people are scared to potentially change something that is essentially cemented in time?
Yeah. And it's interesting because we have the same conversation about, the Constitution on a daily basis in this
Yeah.
country. Are there things that should be updated,
Mhm.
And that's only 300 years old.
Yeah.
And these religions are thousands of years old. So it is interesting, but I'm sure you recognize this as a student of many religions, but in essence, they all kind of center around the same concepts at the end of the day. There's
Mhm.
just different ways for people to live it. But I think the core concept that is really beautiful about religion is it requires faith from the individual.
Absolutely.
And you can have faith in God, you can have faith in the universe, you can have faith in whatever. But if you don't have something that you have absolute faith and trust in that your life will be okay. And as a kid, that's your parents for the most part.
Sure.
For some people, it's not. If they didn't have a great upbringing, so it's harder for them to find that faith later on in life. And if you're able to find that, it's like a weight off your back in terms of what you have to do on your own.
Mhm.
And so that's where I can see religion to be a very, very beautiful thing. And I think there's a necessity for people to have some level of faith, but where it comes short, and this is how I feel about our educational system as well, is it focuses on the rituals, just like education focuses on the problem and the solution,
Mhm.
but they both don't emphasize understanding. And I was fortunate, as it seems you were growing up, to have whether it was parents, whether it's religious figures who encouraged thought, right? And it's only by asking questions that we seek understanding. So you're talking about physics. There's two levels of physics. There's one level where you have your formula sheet, you take it in the test, and you're like, okay, that's a velocity and acceleration question. That means I use the formula with the V and the A, right? The other way is to say, I understand how the calculus behind, position to velocity to acceleration works. I can derive my own formulas because I understand the relationships between these things. It's a different level of understanding, but it's an understanding of the core concepts underneath all of those formulas. And it's a more empowering understanding. And I believe philosophical question asking, I fall really close to Plato in terms of a lot of his beliefs. I feel like the pursuit of philosophical endeavors is critical for any person to truly understand themselves. But if you are to pursue those, you cannot share them with people who are not pursuing those endeavors, because the amount of growth and the difference in your perspective once you start down that path versus the people who are not going down that path is so extreme, and it can come across that it's challenging the fundamental notions of what people who are, say, more religious, who are more entrenched in a certain way of living. If you're asking questions that challenge the very root of their foundation of essentially security in their lives, it's not good. They're going to get upset at you.
Right.
So I meet a lot of people who are very brilliant thinkers, but don't know how to communicate that thought in a subtle way to communicate, or really just to get people to start asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a point, I think, in life where you start asking more questions just to learn more about yourself and the world. And if you can just continue down that path and just ask larger and larger questions over time, I think that's really where you're going to start to build the habits and really your own religion that works for you in terms of how you live every day, what you need to do to make yourself happy. But that's kind of one thing that can go wrong when you institutionalize a set of beliefs in a religion, is that it doesn't work for everybody, and people can turn into outcasts if they don't fit in or if it's not making them happy. And I'm a big proponent that everyone should build their own religion, or at least go through the exercise to understand what they value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my wife and I have talked about this a little bit in terms of, how we would potentially address this conversation with our future children. And we've agreed that we would do our best to provide as much information from all areas as possible, even if that means not necessarily coming from us, but from other people who are,
Yeah.
supposed experts in that field, um, in order to let them maybe not make a decision for themselves, but ask the questions themselves.
Right.
I've never been very attracted to the idea of saying this is what we believe and this is what you'll believe as well.
Right.
Especially when my wife and I have differing beliefs in that topic as well. So that doesn't even make sense for our
Yeah.
family. Um, but you're absolutely right. It promotes a uncomfortable environment, especially when you're talking about potentially disagreeing or proving wrong even
Yeah.
someone's internal structure of their belief system, especially as something as enormous as how they see the universe.
Right.
We're not talking about that beliefs that of how we think our country's government should be structured, and that's a pretty big topic itself.
Yeah.
We're talking about the very fabric of the universe and how you perceive it. And tearing down or even questioning the way someone establishes that structure is, for lack of a better term, very uncomfortable, fearful, scary. It's aggressive.
Yeah.
So you're right. It is difficult to explore that with someone who has a differing belief system and have it end in a beneficial manner, I guess, where both people can walk away with at the very least new information.
Yeah.
But I mean, you kind of touched on something that I've mentioned in a past episode before, and it's a very big piece of my fundamental belief system, and it's being curious over certain in all aspects of life, whether that's my current belief system, whether it's how I perceive my experience with depression, whether it's my perception of you, how I think right now about anything is not the way I will always think.
Yeah.
Because that's not the way we are in any form of our lives. The
And-
way we understand the world is different at 5 than it is at 15, and
Yeah.
it's different again at 50. If it's not, you didn't experience a whole lot of things to allow yourself to change that perspective.
And that curiosity allows you to avoid being judgmental toward
Mhm.
people. It's
Being
yeah.
certain stops the seeking of new information.
Yeah.
If you're certain about something, you're telling yourself, I don't need to know anything else.
Yeah.
What I know is accurate to me.
Yeah.
But being curious, even if you're confident about something, remaining curious about it allows you to continue seeking new perspectives, continue seeking new information, continue to allowing your idea of it evolve, which I think is probably one of the most calming things we can do, because it provides opportunity,
Yeah.
and I've used the example of my depression before. Um, I was certain at one point in my life that depression would win, that I would lose my life to it.
Yeah.
And I held on to that certainty for years. That doesn't leave a whole lot of opportunity for me.
Yeah.
That means that I'm heading towards a very finite end or a finite outcome.
Right.
But if I'm able to maintain curiosity towards it, learn over time that there's a purpose to it, that there's things I can learn from it, there's people I can help through my experience with
Yeah.
it, then that allows me to have a lot more potential paths in
Yeah.
front of me. It's
And
not
by the
this
way,
finite
there's
outcome.
a lot of science that manic depressive personalities are better entrepreneurs.
I've heard some of
Yeah.
those as well. I've heard
Yeah.
some of those. I don't try to talk about, to my business partners who don't suffer from depression
Yeah.
about that, but
Yeah.
I don't want them to think I've got a leg up on them. I wanted to ask you though, just while we're on this topic, are you someone who meditates regularly?
Yeah.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
did you start doing that?
My grandmother is a religious leader in India,
Really?
and she I didn't know this when I was a kid. She's like has her own TV show. My sister recently found a book she wrote in the Library of Congress.
What?
Yeah, insane. And there were only like 200 copies of this book published. I don't know how they got it, but they did.
Oh my
It's a
gosh.
wild. So she's like a really, really wise woman.
Yeah.
And I decided after my second year of college, I wanted to go visit my grandparents by myself, so I can actually spend time with them without having the relationship that I have with my parents there. I wanted to build my own individual relationship with them. I'm really glad I did it. It was in that time she taught me about meditation and what I should be thinking about when I'm breathing, and very, very simple, just like focus on your breath, sit there. And I think for probably several years, I didn't really understand what I was doing when I was doing it. But
As most people probably feel.
right. And then there's this point where when you close your eyes, it's not a nightmare in your head, where you clear out a lot of the bad thoughts and you actually like find peace with yourself. And that took me several years to get to. And I still fluctuate in and out of that.
Right.
But I can recognize now, and I think meditation is really a practice of self-awareness. So what happens at the end of the day is you're in real time, you understand what you're going through. And that's powerful because when you're in, negotiation, business, whatever, and you can sense an emotional reaction starting to fire up, you can just be like, all right, cool. Let me stay even keel. Let me ask a question instead of saying something because I'm pissed off. Right.
Well, and it teaches you to stay present as well.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about a potential outcome or consequence that could happen in the future. You're staying in the conversation that's currently at hand.
Yeah.
Your definition is very, very close to my personal definition, which is meditation is a intentional shift in awareness. Because 99.9% of the time in life, our awareness is external.
Yeah.
We are receiving information from our senses, and processing that information so we can better understand the world or in the environment around us. But through meditation, we remove, or at the very least quiet, those senses. So we're no longer bringing in visual information. We close our eyes. We're not eating or drinking things, so we lose that taste and hopefully even smell sense. And then by sitting very still, we slowly over time start to at least quiet that physical touch sense as well. I'm sure you felt this, where you lose sense of how your hands are in your lap or the seat beneath you, because you spend so much time in a single position that I don't know what actually is neurologically happening at that point, but you stop paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And when you shut off those other senses, the awareness turns inward because there's no outside information coming in.
Yeah.
And that's what allows you to determine, these inward physical or emotional feelings that we maybe overlook because our awareness is always external. And I even have a little outward theory, in terms of physics and meditation, is, according to physics, if you're looking at something like Schrodinger's cat, if you put a cat in a box and close the lid and someone else comes in the room, to them, that cat doesn't exist.
Right.
So, and in physics, something that is unobservable does not exist. Right.
Right.
Well, if we're turning off our senses to the outside world,
Doesn't exist.
as the outside world cease to exist.
Yeah.
Which,
let me throw another wrench into that, by the way. The way the brain interprets senses, basically, it's got 5 different info streams coming into one central location. That then reads all 5 and then presents to you what it deems to be the most important things that you need to see, hear, feel, or touch, right? So there's a tremendous likelihood there is a whole lot more going on around us than we've ever been able to perceive. And so when you're able to meditate, the neurological response is actually very similar to when somebody takes psilocybin mushrooms. It turns off this central part of the brain that basically interprets all of these senses. And so they've actually measured expert monk meditators, and they found the MRIs to be identical to people on psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah, I have read that before. I've read some of the studies where they look at EEGs.
The whole experience is really, you're essentially allowing yourself to receive an unfiltered field of information when you get into a true meditation. But at the same time, you have essentially a level of abstractness from your emotions, because you tend to lose sense of the ego identity, because there's no, to your point, there's no outside words.
Say that again.
So you lose sense of your ego identity. So there's no comparison to the outside world in
Yeah.
meditation, to your point, right? So you've got all this information coming in, and your senses are shut off essentially. So it's like the replacement of that information of what your brain creates.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting here watching it all happen, almost like a TV show. And if you really get into the practice of meditation, you're able to watch yourself with zero judgment, with zero feelings, and just observe, to your point, with curiosity. And when you're able to watch it with just pure curiosity, I think it's the greatest like learning experience you can have in this world. And my core belief is that your inside world is your outside world, or vice versa. And
Oh, of
so
course.
when you have clarity, positivity, and just a wonderful sense of who you are that you build internally in terms of your values, what you're striving for, if you have a very clear picture of the type of life that you want to live or you are currently living, your outside world will very quickly match that.
Mm-hmm. That was amazing. I really, really am grateful that I had you here today just because of what you just said there, because it's not very often that I get to sit and discuss something like this with someone who spends as much time as you do in the space. Uh, and now I can leave here today with a different perspective, or at least a variable perspective than what I came here with. And I'm gonna end up thinking about this most of the rest of the day. But no, that was a very, very unique perspective of meditation. And to your point, it almost allows us to determine a more true identity, because a lot of what people attach their identity to is where it fits in the external environment. It's not even where it fits, actually. I want to restate that. It's what we think is the perception of others in the external environment. There was a sociologist, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, that in like 1902 said, "I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am." And that's kind of in a way how we create our identity. It's
Yeah.
well, not who do I want to be, not who do I think you want me to be, but yeah, that is it.
How am I perceived?
Right.
Yeah.
How am who I think I want to be being perceived by you.
Yeah.
And the fact that we spend so much time trying to identify everyone else's perception of ourselves is exhausting.
Which, by the way, nobody's ever thinking about you. They're going through the same thing in their head.
No, they're in their head thinking
Yeah.
what you think about them.
Yeah.
And being able to just identify that, I think, turns on an enormous light.
Yeah.
Because if you are able to be patient enough to learn to meditate, even because it takes a long time. I'm still learning how, years later, but it's been one of the most monumental practices I've ever implemented. But by turning off all of those senses, by removing yourself from the external world, I think there is an opportunity to really identify that true identity,
Yeah.
like from a very fundamental form,
Yeah.
before it's ever met any perception, any outside
Yeah.
stress, hurdle environment. And I think you only get that from that type of inward conversation, or
Totally.
awareness.
And on top of that, I believe that when you find that truth and you live it clearly and without outside influence being able to change who you are,
Mm-hmm.
there is a sense of gravity that's created around you. And it's like, have you ever met somebody that just knows so clearly who they are?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing you say is going to shake them. They don't care if you like them or you don't, but they're genuinely kind, caring, and loving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those people go really far in this world, and they're the ones we all strive to be like, right? And those people, all they have over everyone else is they know exactly who they are, and all they're trying to do is be that person every day. That's it. It's very, very simple, but we make things a lot harder than they need to be. And so that to I don't know, kind of take the meditation thing and apply it to daily life is like you find this sense of truth through the process, and you find the ability to carry it out in all of the different aspects of your life. And that's what makes you ultimately, much more successful than you could be. It's like success seems so technical when you're growing up, but as you become an adult, you realize like It's not technical at all. It's entirely emotional and spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where like the gravity is. And the technical skills are just a bonus, but you
Right.
don't really need them.
Yeah. It's the ability to separate it from everything we think is important or
Yeah.
crucial, and zero in on the much more simplified.
But again, to your
Blueprint of
point,
it.
right? When you close your eyes and you shut off your senses, you're still in this world and you still have a tremendous amount of sensation in meditation. Yet I would argue that the majority of people spend 100% of their attention on everything outside of them, right?
Right.
If you can still have such a rich life experience with all of your senses shut off around you, then how much more is there to this world that's inside of us that we're not paying attention to on a daily basis?
Yeah. We almost lose taste to the saturation because of the overload of the external senses are experiencing.
Yeah. Then you throw in drugs into the mix, you throw in drinking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a mess.
It is.
You know?
It absolutely is. Wow. Dude, I think that was an amazing place to end it today. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank
man.
you,
I know
Jared,
you
man.
came a long way. But this was just, I walked into the situation knowing it was going to be exceptional, and you surpassed every expectation I had.
Appreciate
I
you,
really,
man.
really
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the
I'm
time
grateful
out
for
of
the
your
opportunity.
schedule to be here.
Yeah.
I'm glad you have the opportunity to experience Colorado this
I'm
weekend.
stoked.
Hope you guys are able to get out there and enjoy yourselves as well. I do want to make sure we are able to direct people to you guys as well. I'm sure some of the people heard about Lasso Gear for the first time and might want to learn more. Would you mind just sharing the best place for them to learn more about you guys?
Yeah, check us out at lassogear.com or at Lasso Gear on all social media. Buy some socks.
Yeah, buy some socks,
Yeah.
guys. My hoodie's on the way. At least I think it is. I put it in last night. That thing
Amazing.
looks soft as
It's
hell.
great.
I can tell. You can't.
Which one did you get? The tie-dye or the camo?
The camo. Like the
Camos
dark.
are nice.
I'm
yeah.
like a black or camo guy. That's like 90% of my closet.
We're actually working on a matching sock to that, by the way.
Matching sock. I'm gonna need those.
That's gonna be sick.
For sure.
Yeah.
Dude, well, thank you again. I really, really hope you were able to get as much out of this time of our time together
awesome.
as I have. We'll absolutely have to make sure we get together again to continue some of these conversations, because you're someone I could sit and talk for a full day with and still, have more to say. So thank you again, man. Thank you guys for tuning in again. Check out what Partha's doing with Lasso Gear, and stay tuned for all those new things that they have coming out here in the very near future. And remember, guys, no matter how hard you fail forward. Thanks.